But we'll go ahead and we will get started at this point. My name is Andy Brisley, and the firm I'm representing is Accelytics. A brief introduction of me in our company. I've been a supply chain practitioner and technologist for over 40 years, and I've gone through many different roles in my career and utilized many different technologies. The company I represent, Accelytics, we are one of the premier boutique supply chain consulting and implementation partners representing Anaplan Solutions. And even though we are currently in very different times, this whole recovery is going to be filled with start and stops and in changes in geography. As supply chain planning professionals, at the end of the day, we have been putting out fires and solving problems since supply chain has come around, going way back to the start of MRP. And the goal of and the objective of these sessions that we're holding on a regular basis is to discuss some of the areas where companies can take action to help them in that recovery period, to help them in the rebuilding process or renewal process. And a lot of this is really focusing on taking actions on some different areas. And today's topic of discussion really gets around concentrating on product rationalization. And this is important today because so many companies are shrinking, and I'll get into that as we are coming up. Not just shrinking, but they're changing and they're focusing on core. A little bit more about the company I'm representing here. And our mission, again, is really to, as a company, to help improve the planner, the FP&A planner, just bring this whole vision of connected planning to reality. The different steps that we are taking in all of the topics that we have discussed really are focused around supply chain while we're talking about it, but without connected planning, we're just kind of sitting on an island. And we want to bring these steps and these processes and talk about the different value that they contain in connected planning. So with that, let's go ahead and just start with product rationalization, this week's topic. And again, the format of this is I'm going to talk 10-15 minutes. I'll open it up to questions. There'll be a recording. We'll be posting this to our website as well as different documents as we make them available. So in product rationalization, when we're talking about product rationalization, we're talking about taking products that are no longer performing or may not be core to your business any longer. And so why would people invest this effort? Well, a big obstacle to investing the effort is the complexity of the different areas and the different data elements. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. But why would we go ahead and invest the whole effort around rationalizing and making sure that the products that we are producing are being effective for us? And number one, and these aren't in any particular order, but product complexity just slows the supply chain down. And if you're in a multi-plant environment and you have to build one piece one place, one piece another, and you have to ship it back and forth, that adds complexity to the supply chain. Not to mention just the fact that if we have to run through different planning processes at each area, how does that impact the overall supply chain response to the different products that you're reviewing? Complexity elongates sales cycles. So it's more difficult as your products become more complex. The sales cycle will start to elongate. You know, when you go and you buy a bottle of soda, it's impulse, it's there, it's on the shelf. And in a lot of retail, it's on the shelf. But when you get into the more complex areas, if you're thinking about automobiles, or even if you're thinking about, how long does it take you to research, this is the TV that I'm going to buy, this is the phone I'm going to buy. Typically not impulse buys, even though they may be on the store. If they're more complex, if they have more features, you're going to want to look at yourselves. And as I've been reading and as I've seen news come out, brands are becoming more and more diluted. If you think about even going back to General Motors, with how many different divisions that they've had. Ford had different divisions. Toyota has different division. Nissan, all the companies, all the auto companies, as an example, have these big brands, or excuse me, these big different divisions. And so as Toyota, whether you're looking at a Lexus or you're looking at a Toyota, what are you really looking at? So your brand becomes more complex. You're a little bit more diluted. Am I going to take a feature in an upper end brand and bring it down? And then does that confuse people even more? If you're going into shelf space, or if you're in a retail environment and your brand's diluted, I did a lot of work with the big box retailers. And sometimes you may be at the mercy of what is referred to as a category captain, and you may only get so much shelf space, regardless of how much you can produce and regardless of how many different features you have or how many different brands you have, you're only going to get so much shelf space. So why would you compete against yourselves? And in the companies that I'm looking at now, I'm going to use an example of Polaris that went out and actually bought boat manufacturers. You know, they started off as snowmobile manufacturers, branched out into motorcycles, branched out into ATVs. And a lot of that value realization that they were hoping to gain, a lot of that, combined manufacturing power didn't really come to pass. And right now, there was just an article last week on how Polaris is shutting down different brands because they weren't able to see that that valuation, that realization of that value. And at the end of the day, as companies, and sustainability was big for some time, but it's really kind of lost a little bit of its luster in kind of being top of mind. But at the end of the day, as you change packaging, as you change the different features and functions, what does that do to how you're presenting it, how you're going to manufacture it, and what is the sustainability impact, not just on your local factory, but as it gets out into the consumer goods. So some of the data elements that we want to ask ourselves and be able to look at, and just as a starting point, why did we even start this? You know, our president's going out to visit a Ford factory that's making ventilators right now. Okay, they're probably not going to continue, but being able to understand why that they built that. Why did they build it? They built it to help a national emergency. Is it core against them in their long-term product line? Are you competing against yourself? And again, this kind of gets down to shelf space and looking at different features and functions. Am I really just from a brand illusion? Am I taking money from Peter to pay Paul? If you look at return on assets, what am I building? How am I building it? And just overall, if you start to review these type of things and look at product rationalization, is it making sure that I'm building the right product? You know, you're going to improve supply chain metrics and you're going to improve your cash flow. So the topic gets to be, well, when should it be done? And I will tell you that I have been with companies that called it a project. We're going to start this. We're going to rationalize our item numbers. We're going to rationalize our finished goods. And you know what? It starts and it stops pretty quickly. And to make this a sustainable practice, you have to change it from a project mentality to a mindset. And hopefully people are able, a big reason that people don't do it is because of the complexity, bringing all those different data elements together. So making sure you have the technology foundation to bring that information together is critical, and it makes it easier to do. So a goal should be, well, let's start looking at this stuff quarterly. And if you're doing new product introductions, incorporate the rationalization. What am I taking out? Am I cannibalizing things? And then also, if you're doing the sales and operations planning process, make this a part of it, but start it quarterly. Make sure that it's part of your processes as you're moving along. And the different elements that you want to look at as you're going through and looking at these things, the brands, the different models within the brands, the different options. And you need to dive deep. When I talk about a bill of material review, the deep BOM review, I can't tell you how often I have seen items that still sit on shelves after their useful life, not just their useful life, but they're no longer serving a purpose, but hey, they're taking up warehouse space, they're taking up MRP space, or people are planning them, people are cycle counting them, and nobody knows what to do with them. It's much easier for, and I'm not dissing the engineers, but it's much easier for them to start from scratch as opposed to seeing the different attributes of the different items to say, how can I utilize what I currently have? So being able to look at that and consider that in the new product introduction, in the different monthly and quarterly meetings that you have. And again, it's got to be a mindset, not just a project. So when you're going through and trying to figure out how am I going to rationalize my products, what people are doing now, and there's a great quote from Harley Davidson. There is an interim CEO there where they looked and saw everything that they've tried to do. Well, they've cut way back. They're looking at only core versus non-core business. Same with Polaris. Same with the auto companies now. What's core, what isn't core? There's a lot of companies going out there that have started. There's a med device company up in the Minneapolis area that has gone out and made personal protective equipment, PPE, to serve their constituents. Even though they're in med device, it's not part of their core review. And they have said, hey, when the issue is over and the stockpiles are built back up to whatever acceptable level, we'll be exiting. The other thing you want to look at, and especially if depending on who your customer base is, do you have to have service revenue? So even though you've discontinued the product, make sure that all your contractual obligations have been filled. That's a step that a lot of companies can overlook, and they kind of get caught in different situations. A, with customer satisfaction. B, with hey, I can't fix something that's out in the field. The next step, and we've talked about these two in the past, is just segmentation. A, B, C, D if you want to, 1, 2, 3, 4. I've actually worked with companies that have done A, B, C, D in one area from a product standpoint, and from a sales standpoint, they've put 1, 2, 3, 4. So the product categories can be an A4, while, so they can segment it at different levels. So make sure that you're segmenting not just your finished goods, but make sure that you're getting down, and this is part of that deep bill of material review, of looking at the different raw materials that are supporting this the process as we go along. And again, a big issue of this is, are your systems capable? How many different spreadsheets do you have to output? And can you look at the where use and all those different, which may seem tactical, but this really does get to be part of the strategic operations of the company when you talk core versus non-core. And then at the end of the day, you have to define what is the end of life processing for the finished goods and or the raw material. So some of the data elements that you want to be looking at is, okay, I'm looking at quantity sold, net revenue. I won't read them all off here, but those are the basic metrics that people want to look at to help them define, is this core, is it non-core? What is my contribution to the overall gross margin? And what is the long-term impact? Am I going to be able to realize revenue in 2 years versus 3 years? And taking into consideration too, what is the product life cycle? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 10 years? Like some cars right now, 10, 12, 15 years. A lot of people are really trying to drive them into the ground. So keeping sure that you look at your product life cycle as you're looking at all of these steps as well. And at the end of the day, why would you do this? Well, you want to realize value from all these efforts. And just being able to concentrate and get back to your core. Many companies, I talked about Polaris, Harley Davidson, many of the automakers, a lot of med device companies are really focusing on things that are outside of their core, but they're going after that. When you decide it's time to do this product rationalization, you want to make sure that you exit gracefully with the customer in mind. Customer loyalty is key. So if you're only selling, let's just say you're in CPG and you're selling something but your only customer is Walmart, but you kind of have an exclusive with Walmart. Well, you probably can't exit that without talking to them. And so this gets back to your contractual obligations, your commitments, and those type of things. But when you're exiting, make sure that you notify them. That's why this needs to be part of either a quarterly, a monthly, or an MPI project. It's not just done in isolation. It's done from a connected version. And all the different tentacles that are attached to this, it all has to be connected, from financial, from sales, to the supply chain. It's all got to be connected. And at the end of the day, when you're going through this, you can change your pricing strategies. The overall cost to serve for you as you're retiring some of these products, as you're reducing your inventory balances, and as you're reducing warehouse requirements, and maybe even contracting out some of this stuff, so it's not necessarily on your books, it's just you're buying something instead of manufacturing and holding. Your cost to serve is going to be impacted greatly and have a big impact on your bottom line. Some of the other areas that we look at when we're able to consume this into a standard business practice is profitable equipment utilization. I mean, Peter Drucker had a quote that I've kind of lived by for some time, and I know I'm giving my age when I talk about Peter Drucker, but there's nothing more wasted than spending time optimizing something that will never be sold. So make sure that when you're doing this, that we're using the equipment that is going to add value to our bottom line, as well as adding value to our customers. And at the end of the day, you don't have to look at and continue to keep all of this inventory on hand. I was with this is very, very impactful to me, only because I was with a CPG company some time ago. They thought they had a market cornered. And my gosh, we ended up not only renting a spare warehouse space, but we also rented, I can't tell you how many different trailers of temporary storage. So getting rid of that, making sure that that cost to serve continues to get lower. So overall, that's kind of my spiel on the product rationalization and why you would go through it. I'll open it up to questions at this time. If anybody has questions, go ahead and raise your hand. Oh, we have a question in the chat room, I think. I can't see it. If you have a question, I'm just going to allow everybody to talk. So go ahead if you have a question.
Hi, Andy. I typed this into the chat room, so but I'll just repeat what I had asked.
Oh, now I see it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Could you explain a little bit more on the project versus the mindset, and kind of a little bit more about its importance?
Sure, and thanks for the question. I will just say, plain and simply, I have been with so many different companies and been around different companies that say, okay, we're going to rationalize our products, right? And they'll either do it at one level, they'll either do it at the finished good level, or they'll try and do it at the raw material level, or maybe they'll just do it within a segment. This has got to be, and so it's not just a project. Projects tend to fail after so much time. They gain a lot of momentum, people lose interest, and it has to become part of the day-to-day operations. So that's what I say by being part of the mindset. So when you're incorporating a new product introduction, well, what does that do to the cannibalization of the old products, and how are we going to retire those old products, and just bringing it into the mindset of your business as you're doing new projects, new products, as opposed to just saying, okay, I'm going to start from scratch, build it up. What can I do? So does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Any other questions? All right, with that, I'll let everybody go. Everybody, hopefully you have a great weekend. Have a safe and happy Memorial Day coming up. There will not be a session next week. The next one will be basically on the opposite side of this, a new product introduction. It'll be done June 4th. And here are the topics that we'll be discussing: exception management, effective versus efficient. So these are the topics that are coming up, and we'll be following the same format. So look forward to everybody joining in later, and hope everybody has a great, great week. Thank you.